New month, new set, and today we're going to be covering the top 10 meta Pokemon card decks in the Pokemon TCG for the month of November, featuring Paradox Rift Pokemon cards. Now, if you guys don't know yet, the set isn't officially legal yet for tournament play with championship point events, but it will be in a couple of weeks. I'm recording this on November 7th, however, the day that these cards are legal for championship point tournament events is on November 17th. And while we're talking about championship point earning events, we have one coming up this Saturday at COMFY HOBBIES, who's actually sponsoring this video. So if you guys want to compete in a massive Pokemon card challenge this Saturday at 5 p.m., check out COMFY HOBBIES. I'll leave their Instagram linked down below. The prize pool looks really good. $10 entry fee with a pack included for just competing. They're also doing a huge sale for cards in the shop that day. 10% off singles, 5% off sealed, and a really good pricing on Paradox Rift booster boxes and Elite Trainer boxes. So huge thank you again to COMFY HOBBIES for sponsoring this video. Located just about a 10-minute walk from Yonge and Steeles, or a 3-minute drive from Yonge and Steeles, right at the very border of Toronto. So I'll see you guys there on Saturday. One small thing I want to get off my chest: there was some doubters out there. There was some haters that said Miraidon's a bad deck, that it's a trash deck. And well, behold, my prediction was correct. As I predicted on the Shovel Squad podcast, I said Miraidon would win the Toronto Regionals. And looky here, we have the legend JW Creewall with his list for Miraidon, so I'll have that pop up on screen right now. For this video, I'm going to include timestamps, so if you guys want to skip to a particular deck, you can go ahead and fast forward as you would like. And before we get to the actual top 10, we do have a couple of honorable mentions, or just some fun decks I want to mention to you guys, which I'll be trying to refine and work on over the course of this month. Not meta by any means, but there is a lot of hype for this deck. It is Cheeseman EX, and or Cheese String Man EX, I should say. It's a fun kind of deck where I get to use my Metal Energy cards again. It honestly isn't in that bad of a spot in a meta where Chien-Pao is actually very popular. You're able to hit Chien-Pao for weakness, and this deck is really fun if you just like picking up cards and drawing them and making it rain, as the attack is called, from Gimmighoul EX. You also get to play with Scizor, and hey, I love Scizor, one of my favorite Pokemon, so it's fun to see that Scizor is an actual viable attacker in this deck too. Next sort of honorable mention, you could say it's not necessarily meta, but it's going to be really fun to play. We got the homie Cloth. Yes, Cloth. Take a look at this list. I'm excited to play with this deck. Definitely a deck I want to make some content with, just because Cloth is the poster child of this deck too. One last honorable mention, we have the homie, the coolest grass type Pokemon out there, Toedscool and Toedscruel EX. So the new Toedscruel card in Paradox Rift, the single prize card, is actually pretty decent. It's basically a control style Pokemon where it locks your opponent out of taking cards out of their discard pile. So this is a hard counter to a Chien-Pao deck. This list I'm showing you guys isn't necessarily refined. I just found it online and it looked pretty decent from what I could see. So coming in at number 10, we have Iron Valiant EX. This is a future type of Pokemon, or a future archetype of Pokemon that has a lot of hype behind it. People think it's going to be very oppressive, being able to take some turn 2 or turn 1 knockouts if you're going to be going second. And one thing I want to note, the meta we're going into for Paradox Rift, a lot of these decks actually benefit more from going second. These decks are really strong in putting pressure on your opponent on the second turn of the game. Whether it's going to be Roaring Moon or Miraidon or Iron Valiant EX, these decks can take knockouts on the second turn of the game, similar to how, you know, everyone would fear the turn 2 Meloetta Donk from VMAX Fusion Strike. And not only is it a deck that can take a knockout on the player's like first turn if they're going second, but you have that Yoga Loop attack, which doesn't just mean you're getting to knock out on your first turn going second. You get a second turn, which is insane. So you can really pop off with this deck. I actually was turn 1 Yoga Looped the other night when I was in line getting some McDonald's, or just waiting outside getting some McDonald's, and man, that was painful, man. Getting turn 1 Yoga Looped. Who would have thought to see in the day? There's also another way to run this deck if you're not a fan of the Rapid Strike Pokemon. You can also play with Entei. This version featuring Entei and Radiant Charizard is also pretty consistent as well. We haven't figured out which is the best way to play Iron Valiant EX yet, just because, you know, the set kind of just came out a second ago. And this version of the deck looks really strong as well. Using stadiums like Magma Basin in here are really handy. So your Entei could potentially be attacking turn 1 because you're going to be using Squawkabilly pretty much anytime you can when you start the game. Yeah, Earthen Vessel is really good as well if you want to just thin out your deck and get those fire energies into your hand and it's a pretty cool deck. Coming in at number 9 is a deck I tied against in the Toronto Pokemon Regionals, and by the way, my Toronto Pokemon Regionals vlog is going to go up as the next video you see on this channel. So if you haven't yet seen my Pittsburgh regional vlog, I uploaded it yesterday. You guys absolutely loved it. It got like 5,000 views in less than 24 hours. It's a long 40-minute tournament vlog, but it's like a movie. It's action-packed. I did as much editing as I could for it. But yeah, the Toronto vlog is coming up, and I tied against a SableZard deck in Toronto, so that's why I bring up the tournament vlog. SableZard is in a pretty strong place right now, and this is one of the decks that's going to take advantage of the new technical machine tool cards. Not much has changed with SableZard. You just get the new TM in there, but otherwise you also got the counter catchers in here too, which are very, very handy. Being able to select which Pokemon's getting swung into is a very strong thing, especially when it's coming from an item card, not a supporter like Boss's Orders. That's probably one of the big things too. There's no Boss's Orders in this deck. It has 2 counter catchers instead. Number 8, we have Mew VMAX Fusion Strike. Now, I'm a huge fan of the double turbo version with lots of Path to the Peak. That version, DTE Mew VMAX. However, this version is very strong, also going second, and in a meta where going second is very, very good, especially with a lot of 2-prizers out there, potentially you can swing into and take some big prizes for. Fusion Strike is probably the choice you might want to go with. Mew VMAX doesn't really gain too much from the Paradox Rift set. It does gain the new future supporter card, Professor Turo's Scenario, but it's essentially like a penny. Penny can only take basic Pokemon. Professor Turo's Scenario allows you to take any Pokemon and bring it to your hand, and then you discard whatever is attached to it. So sure, you might lose a double turbo energy, but you also prevent your opponent from taking a potential 3 prizes. Mew VMAX still very, very strong in the game. It hasn't, it hasn't been completely destroyed, with Roaring Moon being one of the best decks right now. And I think the only thing that will really just put the nail in the coffin for Mew is actual rotation, where it literally becomes unplayable. Coming in at number 7 is a fan favorite Pokemon. We got Charizard EX. Yeah. People still love Charizard. Charizard is still very, very strong. Paradox Rift doesn't really change too much for Charizard, so if you have a really consistent Charizard list you've been using from the previous set, you can probably continue using that and not have to make too many changes. In a meta where going second is very strong, I've actually seen a lot of people talk about going with the Arbenzard build of the deck and going second, so you can guarantee that turn 1 VIP, because you need to basically get those Charmanders set up to really play the game and to really get the ball rolling. On top of that, going second isn't bad either, because if they choose to turn 1 path you have the Charmander in this deck with the Blaze of Destruction attack, which destroys a stadium in play, which is very, very annoying. I personally think the Arbenzard version is the best way to play this list, which involves Entei and Forest Heal Stone and 4 copies of Arven, but there are other versions of Charizard EX which are popular, like the Arceus V-Star variant. Coming in at number 6, it is the deck that is my absolute arch nemesis before going into this set. Now, I actually don't mind them anymore. We're talking about Turbo Lost Box, featuring of course Raikou and Dragonite in this deck. Not too much changes for this deck in Paradox Rift. Turbo Lost Box and just Lost Box in general has like a cult-like following, so if you've been practicing Lost Box for forever and you're not scared of these Iron Hands that are going to be trying to clap your Pokemon, then maybe you can just hang out with the big dogs with this deck. I've also seen variations of Turbo Lost Box running Iron Hands EX. Potentially some people are taking out the Raikou in place of Iron Hands EX and using that instead. Still a very, very strong deck. Number 5 is another deck which is seeing a lot of success in Japan from what I can see, and there's a lot of hype for it. People are actually putting this as the best deck in the format. Lost Tina is still very, very popular. Once you get that first Tina set up, and you're able to do your Star Requiem and the other attack, you basically set up that big boss and take 2 big KOs. Now, the one thing I think this deck really has going for it is it's going to be running 3 copies of Path to the Peak on average, and Path to the Peak is a fantastic, fantastic stadium, if not one of the best stadiums in the game, which counters a lot of the decks in the meta. If they're not able to knock out that Path to the Peak stadium on the board, it really slows down a lot of decks. You don't need the Radiant Greninja concealed cards for it to be working really well, so Path to the Peak is just, it's so good. If you can play a deck with Path, it's pretty viable. Number 4, another deck which is going to be a little harder to play now with the Iron Hands EX running around, we got Gardevoir EX. Now, Gardevoir EX actually does gain a little bit of love from the Paradox Rift set. You get that scary looking Jigglypuff. Screamtail is a pretty solid attacker. It's basically a sniping Pokemon which you load up with damage counters, and the more you put on it, the more damage you're going to get to do. Gardevoir also acquires the help of Professor Turo's scenario as a help in the supporter lineup, and then you also got counter catchers in there too. So you might see less decks running as much heavy bosses in it, and now you got counter catchers, which, I mean, hey, you're pretty often attacking with Baby Gardevoir with reversal energy in the deck, so the counter catchers I feel like are gonna come clutch. Deck number 3, this is a staple in Canada. We got Chien-Pao EX with Baxcalibur. Chien-Pao in a fantastic spot right now, and with the help of Iron Hands EX. We'll talk about the Iron Hands version in a minute, but first up, we'll just talk about like the vanilla Chien-Pao EX. It is in a really strong place. This deck is really strong and consistent with the help of Bibarel as well as your main draw engine. Now, if you want an updated list with some Iron Hands support, I know Kieran Farah just put up a YouTube video today or yesterday going over what a lot of the decks currently gain from the newest set. But now let's get to the Iron Hands list that I found that has Chien-Pao. And Iron Hands EX has two popular slots, or two popular decks it's going to go into. First of all, Miraidon, which I think is the obvious choice because it is an electric Pokemon, and yeah, this whole engine built around accelerating electric energies. But you also have Chien-Pao. The really cool thing about Iron Hands EX is its main attack that you're going to be using, Amp You Very Much, only requires 1 electric energy and then 3 colorless, which can be fulfilled with the water. Those water energies can be accelerated with the help of Baxcalibur, and now because we have a way to search out energy cards of your choosing with the new item card Earthen Vessel, you're able to search out the electric energies from your deck when you want. So charging up Iron Hands EX for that 4 attack cost isn't too hard to do with this deck. Now on to the second best deck in format. In my opinion, it is going to be Miraidon EX with the help of Iron Hands EX. I have been waiting for this to be like a top 1, top 2 deck for a long time. Iron Hands EX makes it possible. Miraidon has already been a really strong staple deck in this meta for the last couple of months now. I've been playing it for like the last 4 months, and basically the deck can pretty much stay the same for the most part. However, you're going to be wanting to tech in 1 to 2 copies of Iron Hands EX for this deck now. And that's because Iron Hands EX helps you in those matchups which are a little harder to deal with, like Turbo Lost Box, like Gardevoir in some cases. And you also get to feast upon Squawkabillies and Lumineons and take 3 prizes from those, which is an amazing feeling. Just taking 3 prizes for an easy supporter Pokemon feels great. Now the list right here I'm showing you guys isn't my personal list, it's just a list I found online that did pretty well in a tournament, but there are a lot of great lists you can find from Japan doing really well. Now personally, I've already, like, I can understand this deck is going to work really well no matter what. You know, Miraidon's already been proven to be a very consistently strong deck, so I'm not going to bother refining like this sort of a typical Miraidon list with Iron Hands EX. The one thing I'm personally trying to really refine is a Magnezone V-Star version of this deck with Iron Hands EX, because of the fact that so many players are choosing to go second now in this current meta, that I figure, hey, if I'm going to be gifted going first half the time, then I'm going to want to be able to set up something that can be really devastating going into any kind of deck. And I think that deck, or I think that card of choice is Magnezone V and V-Star, because it synergizes really well with Iron Hands EX, with the double turbo energy being a attack requirement for one of the attacks. And of course, you have that Radiant Greninja Moonlight Shuriken style attack with the V-Star ability. For 2 electric, you snipe 2 Pokemon for 90. Being able to hit 2 Pokemon for 90 is fantastic. It can also be the way you soften up a Pokemon for Iron Hands EX to then clap him later on in the game and take those extra prizes. If you're a believer of Miraidon, this is the format to be playing Miraidon. It only gets better from here. I'm excited. And also, there's going to be a Miraidon EX League Battle deck that comes with, I believe, Regieleki VMAX later in November. Number 2, it does hurt me to put it at number 2 and not number 1. But yeah, let's get to our number 1 deck, potentially the best deck in the game right now, and that is Roaring Moon EX. This Pokemon is an absolute scary Pokemon. This is nightmare fuel right here. And the thing that this deck really has going for it is its very strong consistency early game, setting up Roaring Moon EX on your turn 1 if you're going second, and getting a big knockout with it with one of the 2 attacks. The fact that you can swing for 220 essentially for those 3 energy cost requirement, or instead go for the effect attack, which just instantly knocks them out and you have to put Roaring Moon down to 30 HP. This deck is very, very scary. I played against it so much on the ladder. I'm sure you guys have played against Roaring Moon a whole lot as well. It's a deck I will be building because it is going to be, I think, one of the best decks, at least in the top 4, top 5 area for the next couple of months. So it's a deck you're going to have to respect. It's a deck you're going to have to know how to build your deck against. If you guys want to see one of the most anticipated videos of all time for this channel, the Pittsburgh Pokemon vlog, click on screen right here to check it out. If you want to see the Toronto vlog, click here when it eventually goes up, or check out this Pokemon Japan vlog right here, which I know you're going to love as well. Sign up for Comfy Hobbies Pokemon Challenge this Saturday. Again, their info link down below, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.